Okay, I hit record and I'm with Aaron V.E. Griffin. Griffith. I just gotta tell you, I've done 12 sessions this week, and you are the seventh or eighth person who I know very well. And I still your name.
That's okay. I'll take it out on you in Cleveland.
Thank you. You can line it in another chapter and be less nice. I'm with Aaron V. Griffith. Damn it. It's not, I'm just going to talk anymore. The podcast is over. We're done. All right. I'm with Aaron. Fantastic editor, wonderful writer, budding podcaster. Yes.
We're going to get there. We've got a few episodes in the can. I want to put a few more episodes in before we start publishing. It's going to be called Revision Wizards. The feed is up now. Yeah.
Oh, is it really? Okay, great.
Yeah, the feed is up now. Episode 0, which is the plug, is published, but that's all.
Nice.
And you'll be able to find us on, your favorite podcast player and on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm subscribing right now as we talk.
Okay, so It's going to be an every 2-week podcast with me and Miss Catherine M.H.
Also a fantastic editor. What are y'all talking about on the podcast?
We're going to be doing editing specifically with the 3-story method, since we're both 3-story method editors.
Nice.
We're going to be doing discussions about the scene rubrics and the story rubrics. We're going to be doing maybe interviews with editors. Hint, hint. We're going to be doing. Yeah, we're going to be doing scene analyses with our community.
Awesome.
So, we may pluck a few from your community too if we need to.
Yeah, do. And, I owe you like 7 episodes or something. So if you ever want me to send you a piece that you can rip apart, just let me know. I'll pass it over.
All right.
Yeah. I feel like I owe you probably at least 5 or 6 chapters to let you pick apart. But yeah, so that's awesome. I'm excited about it. I just subscribed. So
thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm your first subscriber, but I seriously doubt that's true. You probably have many already.
Actually, you are, because this is the first public announcement we've done.
Oh yes, winning. Okay, I will keep.
I don't even think I'm subscribed.
It's weird. So man, I know that people listening are like, can you just get to the end? It's weird because I subscribe to my own podcast, but I never listen to it. Yeah, I actually just subscribe to it to make sure it goes up on time. But I listen to myself for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, what is he doing? And I can't do it. So, and it's not constructive criticism either. It's just flat out like, take his mic away, stop him. Yeah, so that's yes. So yeah, it just rages my imposter syndrome, so I can't listen to it. But I do subscribe to it just to make sure it comes out.
Well, I subscribe to yours, and I actually do listen to it, and believe it or not, I enjoy the digressions.
Oh, thanks.
So
it's
a
50,
podcast.
50.
Well, it's a podcast host who's a person,
Yes, he is human, very, extremely. Yeah. So anyway, I'm excited for the podcast, Revision Wizards. I'm pumped. I can't wait for y'all to start putting out episodes. It's gonna be great. Getting several in the can is smart. That's a good idea.
And we're only going to publish every 2 weeks to start with, because it's always easier to go up than go down.
It is, especially if you're editing people, like, a good scene edit takes an hour or more. I don't know that you can do a scene edit in less than that. And I mean, I'm sure you can if you're really good at it. If you're messy like me and you digress on 1,000 things, like, it takes an hour or more. So it's I think I think every 2 weeks is good, because it's getting more and more competitive to podcasts. So I think being able to really like hone in and focus and produce something good is smart. Yeah. Seems like a wise decision. That's very cool. All right. Anything else in the works that we should know about for you before we start? I mean, I know you're always editing and you're always taking clients, so somebody should. Nope. You're a great editor.
Somebody should hire me.
Yeah, somebody should hire Aaron. Okay, so let's talk about your piece. Tell me about this. So you were telling me before we hit record that this is probably a reader magnet.
Yes.
So talk to me about this world. Talk to me about what's happening in the book. I also know that some of my edits are probably unfair because you told me to, I tell people like, hey, like 3,000 words is probably all we can do. And so you took me seriously and like actually cut a lot of stuff out of here.
I did. There is stuff before and stuff after, but yeah, I also want to be fair to you and respectful of your time. So
I appreciate it. Yeah, I figured because I read the opening and I was like, this does not feel like an Aaron opening. Like I've read your work before, and you're usually really great with like scene descriptions. Like when we get further into the piece, it's the scene descriptions are really awesome. But yeah. I was like, this doesn't feel like Aaron's. This is what he cut out of here. Anyway, all right. So what we're
what we're looking at, like I said, is probably a reader magnet that grew out of our last session.
Nice.
So this is probably in the neighborhood of 30 years before that work, that manuscript. Okay, so our protagonist, Hale Montington, he's called Haley here because he's in 3rd grade.
Interesting. I was wondering how you were going to bridge the like, because I remember the last one we read was very dystopian, like not totally dystopian, but it had that like dystopian feel to it.
Yeah.
With the trucker who is like chasing down this woman who's part of this society of powered people. And so when you told me this was a reader magnet, my mind was actually, I was like, how in the world is he going to get from a school to a dystopian trucker? But
yeah, 30 years is how you're going to do it.
Yeah, that's how you do it. That does it right there.
So, well, what you said the last time was that, you know, I made a comment about how the main character didn't get any magical education because his mother was, you know, such a twerp.
Yep.
And you were like, oh, that's too much for this scene. I'm like, okay, well, we can make it a reader magnet and do that.
Yeah.
You know, and show that.
Yeah, this is a great showing of that.
So, and I know you can't see it because it's just a little bit of the scene, and it's not related to the other scene that we've done, but this scene includes some foreshadowing about the main novel that presumably the reader will have already read when they come to my website and give me their email address for this book.
Awesome. That's very cool. And it is weird. I do find that readers will grab my reader magnet and read it before they read my series. It's a weird, like, it's almost like they see that there's a reader magnet and they're like, okay, I'm going to use this as a test case to see if I actually want to spend time in the book. So,
well, if they get the reader magnet, give me their email address and then give me their money. I don't care about the order in which those things happen. Yeah.
The goal is, enjoy the book and give me your money. That's
exactly.
Yeah. My brother, who also writes, posted a meme today on Facebook of this it's just a picture of a person, but the caption said, the writer of this book spent 5 years looking in the mirror declaring, I am a fraud, I am a fraud, I am a fraud. So I feel like they're deserved my $2.50. So I totally feel that way. I don't when I read people's books, I always buy them because I could get them from the library or I could borrow them or whatever, but if I have the money, I buy them because because I know they spent 5 years looking in the mirror declaring themselves to be a fraud and they deserve compensation for that. So anyway. All right. So we got a reader magnet. Mean Mother, how does this piece, I know we've jumped in the beginning here. Talk to me about how this opens up, because I have a strong opinion about a scene you need right before this.
The previous scene is basically a day in his life at school, and it's pretty short.
Okay.
It talks about his headaches, about Bushnell being nasty to him, Mrs. Bushnell, his teacher.
Yeah.
And then Mrs. Grayson comes to him at the end of the day and says, come to my office first thing in the morning.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. And that's what I needed. I need to see someone being nasty to him.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't see it, because of where we started the piece, I didn't see it. I was like, man, I really want to make sure we see that, because it's hard to tell with kids as to whether or not. Yeah. I'm also really happy this is a reader magnet, because writing a book in a 3rd grade voice, oh my gosh, that's like, that would be torture.
Yeah,
That would be
I'm
so
shooting for
hard.
10. I'm shooting for 10 to 20K in this.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah, you can pull off 10 to 20K in a third grade voice. A whole book though. That's tough. So
I don't know how those middle grade people do it. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, especially when the third graders interacting with other third graders, I feel like it's easier because everybody has the same like pacing and cadence, and they all kind of talk similarly. But when you've got a third grader in a world of adults,
yeah,
that's tough, man.
yeah.
I would slide in and out of those voices all day. So yeah, so we can skip this note because we know what you're doing. We can skip that. Oh, before I just start going through these, is there anything specifically you wanted to talk about?
No.
Awesome. That's what I like. I just get to do what I want to do. No, I'm just
Yep. It's your podcast. Isn't that how it works?
It's my podcast and I'll pod if I want to. Okay, so this isn't you need more in the transition here. And I don't know if this is something you cut, but he knocks on the door. They tell him come in, and a tall man's standing next to him. I need to see him walk into the room. It's like one sentence. I need to see him enter the room, and I need to see a little bit what's going on in the room. Does that make sense?
You need to see Haley enter the room?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless this dude sneaks up behind him.
No, he's already in the room. It's like he and the counselor have been talking before the child arrives.
That's kind of what I assumed. So
Okay.
I just need to see the room a little bit more. And this is one of those things of like, I'm not sure if you cut this or not, but like the next day, Hallie went to Miss Grayson's office and knocked on the door. Come in, Hallie. A tall man stood next to her, a wide and eye-watering yellow tie adorning his conservative gray suit. So like that's weird because it's like come in, Hallie, and then there's a man. So I just needed like one sentence that's like Hallie stepped in the room, Miss Grayson was sitting behind the desk, and a tall man was there next to her. Like just
Okay.
that, like, yeah. That one little more beat of transition to help my imagination. Because
okay.
What I originally imagined was come in, Hallie. The first note I left you was come in, Hallie, and then I read a tall man stood next to her, and I pictured Hallie being like, oh, like before I got into the room, there's a tall man. And so I wanted Hallie to like respond to the tall man and be like, I'm going to the office. Like, so.
Oh, okay.
So I just need you to like orient me in the space.
Okay.
And, like there's certain ways that like I don't recommend trusting my imagination as a reader. And this is one of them.
Like, as somebody who's written smut books, I get that.
Yeah, you don't want to leave it up to my imagination. You want to let me know where everybody's sitting and standing. So yeah. Anyway, that's just a little note. So then we have this good morning, and then Holly thought he sounded dead, which is a really great note for a third grader. My name's Mr. Hazley. I'm going to be talking to you, giving you, he gives this paragraph about like what he's going to do. He's like, I'm not going to do anything painful. In fact, I won't even touch you. Now that's an interesting line, just because I don't know where this is going. So part of me wonders, like, is this guy going to touch him? But I don't know that you need to change it. Again, like, it depends what you want to leave up to my imagination. So Hallie's like, oh, okay. And then we have this thought here. And my question is like, this is the first utterance of him that I see. Now, there's probably more before. But the first kind of interaction of a character really defines the character.
Okay.
You got this thought here. That's quick, he thought. I know he's not going to touch me. I know that's not allowed. Which, again, because you said it twice, now makes me feel like, oh, that guy's going to touch him. I guess, and not in the way you intended. I guess it's all okay just getting started like this. At least it's not Bushnell. So what are you hoping we learn about Hal from this thought?
My thought was that Hallie's assessment of the situation is quick, and he feels like he doesn't need to be as guarded as he would be with like the teacher that hates him.
Okay.
He can let the barrier down a little bit, even though he doesn't know this guy.
I like that. Okay. So I would lean on, a lot of times third graders kind of like, well, when you're talking about a third grader, you're talking like an 8-year-old, 8 or 9-year-old.
8 or 9, yeah.
8 if their birthday's in like, you know, in a early month, they didn't get promoted up. No,
10
sorry,
if you're
8,
like me.
flip it. 8 if their birthday's in like late May. Yeah, 10 if they're like you and me. My birthday was September 3rd, so I was always like the oldest kid in the class.
Yeah.
Because I hit that right on that cutoff line. So this like that age kid is going to look for context clues of how to feel, and they're also going to be very self-focused, right? Like they're not quite to adolescence yet where they've started perceiving how other people perceive them. Does that make sense? Like when we hit like 12, 13, 11, 12, 13, we start to like perceive other people's eyes on us. He's not there yet, but he is at the stage where he's going to look for context clues as to how to respond. So I would change this thought just to give us in that mindset that he already trusts Mrs. Grayson. So if he looks at Mrs. Grayson and Mrs. Grayson smiling, then he'll be like, this is okay. It also stops you from using the word touch me twice, which is, again, don't leave it up to my imagination. So yeah.
And you used to be a pastor, man.
Dude, that just means I've seen some crap. Yeah, so that's just a quick note of like, you know, for the podcast listener, your first several engagements, your reader's first several engagements with your character are going to set up how we feel about that character, how we in this case, I really want to set up like how we interpret this character's age. And so looking at context clues gives us a hint that he's young, right? He's in elementary school here. We've set that up, and this tells us that like, okay, he's a little kid. Yeah. This is just me playing with language. There's nothing there to really talk about. Oh, I really love this description. This is the Aaron description I was expecting, like the strong, really nicely done. So I'm just going to read it because it's good. Inside was a comfortable looking desk, the sort of thing you might find in a doctor's office. One cushioned chair, the most comfortable looking Hallie had ever seen in the school, sat behind a desk while 2 chairs sat in front. Both looked padded and comfortable, not the awful stuff he usually sat in at school, the ones who made his tailbone hurt. So I love that you focused in on a specific thing, right? Like often when I'll read authors, they tell me like things in the room that don't matter. Like the walls were green and the carpet was brown and the desk was big and mahogany, right? Like, and then it's like, okay, why does that matter? Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm just describing the room. Like, no, I need to know specific, like what you're doing is you're identifying specific things, the chairs, and you're talking about how comfortable they are. And then you're giving me this like note from Hallie that gives me like his state of mind and like the emotional tone he's experiencing. So it's like, yeah, these are really comfortable chairs, way more comfortable than the chairs that I sat in, which communicates to me that he's like relaxed and like he's like, oh, this is okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like A+ description of the room, really nicely done. I liked it a lot. And then I love this ominous moment here. But again, because you said the word touch a kid twice. So I'm going to leave you with Mr. Hazley, Hallie. Like I said, you can just come down the hall to my office if you have any trouble. I read that, I was like, oh, this is a molesting story. But don't go back to Mrs. Bushnell without talking to me first. And I was like, no, the principal's in on it. Mr. Grayson closed the door gently behind her and latched it with a click. And this one is like, Aaron, what did you send me? What did you send me? Yeah, so I would just, I think if you take out the second touch me, it's going to be fine. But yeah. Excuse me 1 second, I need to cough. So we're back. In conclusion, don't let Jeff assume that kids are going to be touched.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if other readers will experience that. Maybe it's just that short stint that I worked in anti-human trafficking, but this is where, at this point in the book, when the latch clicked, it's a great ominous description of like, boom. And you can see the third grade kid being like, oh, I'm locked in here now. And like, then I was like, oh no, what's this guy gonna do to this poor kid? Yeah, anyway.
Well, I sort of wanted that. I'm not going for child molesting here, but I did sort
that's
of
not what
want
happens in the piece. We should tell people to have it right. No children are molested.
no children are harmed in this.
Yeah.
Yes. But I wanted something ominous that he doesn't understand and he's not sure about.
Okay, I like that.
Because he's never done this before. He doesn't really understand why he's here.
Okay. You have here this utterance that says, okay, I guess, said Hallie. The problem is the door's already closed and locked. He's talking to a door. So I would, with what you just said, I would add here a description of a thought that he's wondering if it's like too late to go back to recess.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like he's like, the door just locked. Is it too, can I go back to, like, maybe I should leave for recess. Like maybe this wasn't such a great thing. I don't want to go back to Miss Bushnell's class, but maybe I could make it in time for gym. Like, that kind of thought of a third grader that's like, I don't know that I want to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a great opening, right? Like it's nice that we really get to know him. I was playing with this language because at this point I was kind of messing with Hallie's age, but I don't actually think this. It's a test, right? It's a test. Aren't those supposed to be hard? And I made this is a test, right? Aren't those supposed to be hard? I actually think yours is better for his age. I'd put it back to what it was.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's like, I was like, how has this kid, because at this point I was picturing like, somebody in like early adolescence. I was like, how has he never had a test? But as a third grader, he's going to be nervous about a test. Now, I will say this line, I don't know what this is about. That's a pretty self-aware line for a third grader. He's probably going to say here, I don't do good on tests.
Okay.
Right? Because, I don't know what this is about has a self-awareness to it of like, I'm feeling afraid. I don't know why. And the reason I'm feeling afraid is because I don't have all the information I need. Right. So there's a processing there that's probably a little bit too old for him, but he will just, third graders are still in that, they're coming out of it, but they're very close to that like raw phase of like kindergarten, first and second grade, where they just say whatever is on their mind. They just like say it out loud. So instead of, he's going to kind of say here, like, I don't do good on tests a lot. Like I feel Miss Bushnell says I'm a bad test taker, right? Like, and this is that place where he can like, later on you do this, but letting him like use others to justify the world around him. Like we were saying at the front, we're like, oh, if Mrs. Grayson's happy, I'm happy. This is that same thing of like, Mrs. Bushnell says I'm stupid and can't take tests. Right.
Okay.
Like that's
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here, instead of thanks, you said, so you have like, I don't have any special abilities. Mrs. Bushnell thinks I'm stupid. Megan says, Mrs. Bushnell says I'm stupid. Because he's at this age, he's going to be aware to what's immediately happening. Does that make sense? So if she's thinking it, like, again, it's that like level of processing where she said this, that means she thinks I'm stupid. He's just going to say whatever it was she said. Mrs. Bushnell says I'm a bad test taker. Mrs. Bushnell says I don't pay attention in class. Mrs. Bushnell says, she says I'm stupid.
Well, the reason that I went that way is because somebody who's hanging on to their professionality in the classroom wouldn't say that. But what I want is that the way she treats him clearly says that, even though she doesn't utter it.
Interesting. Yeah, and I wonder if you could say something like, I don't have any abilities. Miss Bushnell says I'm bad at school. Right? Like,
yeah.
We just want it more direct and blunt to really communicate that like this is a kid.
Okay.
You know, I mean, again, third grade is a weird year because it's a transition year. Some kids transition faster than others. You might get a like, she thinks this thing about me. They're still in that storytelling phase though.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like he's gonna talk about what he's observing and what he's imagining. So you may want to add a story here. Like, I don't think I have any special abilities. Yesterday, I couldn't even get the pencil sharpener to work. And Mrs. Bushnell said I'm useless. Right? Like that's like a third, like a kid thing is everything's a story. Right? Like, so, you know, up here, you might add like, this is a test, right? Is it going to be hard? I took a test yesterday in math class and I got every answer wrong.
Okay.
So
yeah, that makes sense.
I might get these wrong too, right? Like it's like I'll probably get these wrong too. Mrs. Bushnell said I can't pass any tests. Like Mrs. Bushnell said I'm never going to get out of the third grade the way that I take tests, right? It's that kind of like storytelling, immediate observation. This is what I see. I'm looking around the world and applying it directly to my life, but I'm not making complex inferences yet because I'm still too young to understand how people perceive me. A junior high student's going to be like, oh, she laughed at me. She must think I'm ugly. Because they've moved into that, like her action, I can translate into how they perceive me. And it actually becomes too much at first. Junior high voices, everything is about them. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, oh, that person went to the bathroom. They must think I stink. Right? Like everything is about them, even if it has nothing to do with them. Before this, it's like direct observation of stories around them and mm-hmm. like this interpreting the world. So as we talk it out, I think you'll get a better kid voice here if you start adding some of those like 2-sentence stories in here.
Okay.
I tried to climb the rope in gym and I fell all the way down 7 times. The gym teacher says I'm bad at tests. He says I shouldn't take tests anymore. Yeah, that kind of.
Okay.
The human head weighs 9 pounds. That was the one from Jerry Maguire. He kept saying that over and over again. I can tell just by talking that you are stupid, Haley said, with a smile that came across his face. I just took this. So you had these 3 lines. You actually seem pretty smart. I know your grades aren't the best, but that's okay. I'm not here to look at your grades. I'm here for your abilities. I don't know why, but it felt to me like to connect it better to this, like, you know, thing about Mrs. Bushnell, to give the excuse first. I can tell just by looking at you, know, stupid Haley, the man said with a smile crossing his face. I know your grades are the best. You seem pretty smart. I'm not here to look at your grades. I'm here for the abilities. I don't know why that sounded different to my ear. And now that I read it, they feel the same. So I would just ignore that. Okay. It all is fine. Okay, here I want more on his mom.
Okay.
Because here's a real place where he's going to tell stories. And third graders who, like any kid who's having a rough time at home, it kind of depends on what stage they're in. If they don't understand yet that their home life is different. For example, if they haven't told a story that's caused trouble at home yet, they're just going to be open about what's happening and then immediately regret what they said based on people's responses.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there were kids that live down the street from me, and we had them over to the house all the time for dinner. But just one instance, they came over to play, and they were like, "Oh, you have beds? I just sleep on my clothes." And I was like, "Wait, what's happening?" Well, the family couldn't afford any furniture, so that's nobody's fault. This kid isn't being abused, but I was like, "You don't have a bed?" He got real closed off because I shared something I wasn't supposed to share, right? Like, and now I don't want to get people in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to make anybody angry, so I'm going to become really reserved. So I'm saying all that to say, like, he's going to introduce his mom here and how his mom talks. and what his mom feels about him, and he needs to be a little tiptoey. He needs to say things and then back them down real quick, because he doesn't want to get in trouble with his mom, and he's going to try to protect her even if she's horrible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
He's not at that junior high phase yet where they start interpreting their parents a little bit and they start like rebelling against their parents. This age kid, if there's problems at home, they tend to internalize it. I'm doing something wrong. So they're going to try to avoid that internalization. So like, control my powers. I don't have any special powers. I told you, I get the worst grades in my class, and my teacher hates me. She told me so. She said she's going to pass me just so I don't have her again next year, because she doesn't want to see my face anymore. And you can't tell my mom. She said if I get in trouble again at school, she's going to take everything away from me. I mean, she's really nice. I love my mom, but don't tell her, right? Like, it's that kind of like rambly, and then like, but revealing things they're not supposed to reveal. So I would build this out a little bit and make it less direct and more like example giving.
I'll think about it that way. My image of his mom is somebody who's nasty pretty much all the time. You could explain it primarily because of, psychosocial and financial stress, or whatever you want.
Yeah.
But her behavior is pretty consistently unpleasant to him. So I think he would certainly know that. So,
yeah, but it's like, he might know it, but he's still going to be defensive of his mom and afraid of what happens when he goes home. Okay. Right? Because he's probably, unless he's hanging out with friends at their houses all the time, he's not at a place where he's like, oh, this isn't how moms are supposed to behave.
Mm-hmm. Unless
he has examples in his life of like, these are other moms, he's like, no, this is just what life is. This is how life works. Okay, right? Like, when kids start to get older, they're like, this is not how life works, and this is not okay. But at this age, they're like, no, I just want to please her. I want to try to make her happy, and if I can just make her happy, maybe I won't get in trouble again. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So there's a like avoidance of wanting to displease a parental figure. Yeah. I'm not, also, by the way, I'm not a psychologist, so this is just what I've observed in children as I've worked with them. I'm not a psychologist. So if you're a psychologist and you want to come on and like tell me I'm wrong, I'm totally open for that. We'll do another podcast. We'll bring Aaron on and you can tell us all about children. But yeah, I've just been around a lot of them. And I haven't touched them. See how that feels when somebody says you're not going to touch a kid? It feels like I did, doesn't it? It does. Yeah. Anyway, I need a little bit more. I forget so many emails. I need a little bit more emotional build here. There's a non sequitur. So he's like, do you have a headache right now, Hallie? The sudden shift in topic jolted Hallie, who looked up and saw the man holding a pencil with a pad and paper on the desk. It hadn't been there before. And then I just need a little more transition to like, how, and I would actually have him probably look at the tie first. Hallie looked up for the pen and paper and caught the man's tie caught his eye. Why is your tie yellow? Right? Like, and that's a little, I would probably just make it a statement. Your tie is really yellow. That feels more kid-like. Okay. Just a like blatant observation. So was there a reason you wanted him to have that non sequitur? Yeah, I wanted him to be a little discombobulated by the question about his headaches and the sudden change of topic. It's like we're going from something that is not terribly emotionally fraught to something that is. His because emotionally fraught. Yeah, because his mother and Mrs. What's her name don't believe he has them. They think he's lying. Gotcha. Okay, and so
And it's, you know, it's like, you know, the kid who pretends to be sick to get out of class, you know, and because it's a headache, you
Okay,
know, they can't, you know, you can't stick a thermometer in his mouth and check.
gotcha. So I would add a line here. I see where you're going now. I would add a line here that says something about, you know, Hallie always got in trouble when he talked about his headaches, right? Like, or, you know, people.
Some of that was in the earlier stuff that we jumped past.
We jumped past. Okay.
Yeah, that I cut.
Okay. Yeah.
Like in the previous day that you didn't see, you know, he had his headache. He tried to go to the nurse's office or whatever.
So we've seen it. Okay.
So we've seen
it.
Yeah,
you don't need to bring it up. Okay. Well, that makes sense then. Yeah, that makes the non sequitur then really works. I still would make it an observation. I wouldn't make it a question. I'd be like, your tie is super yellow. Yeah, your tie hurts my eyes. I actually had a kid tell me that one time. It's not. I was like, yeah, I like how you're dressed too. Anyway, yeah. So I'd make that. Yeah, but that makes sense that he'd give it, especially if you've shown it already. You don't need to call back to it. Yeah, I think that's right. There's nothing there that we need to talk about. This is all really good. I was really at this point in the conversation, I'm really into it. You did a great job with Mr. Hazley's voice, like the way he responds here to the non sequitur. Unperturbed, Mr. Hazley smiled. My tie is mostly intended to get attention, to look silly, so people don't forget me quite as easily as they would otherwise. Today, I chose bright yellow, but I also have a bright orange one and a red polka dotted one. And a red and a purple polka dotted pattern one, and one with stars and twinkle lights. Stars that twinkle in the light, like glitter. I don't think you need to be like people sometimes give me crazy ties. You don't need it. But let's get back to your headaches. Do you have one right now? That's a great, this is somebody who's really great with kids because they're going to follow the weird story and then they're going to come back to what they actually want to talk about, and they're going to be super patient the whole time, right?
Yeah, this is somebody who works with kids and who is in sort of magical education.
Yeah,
you know, so
and you're nailing that voice. The voice is really great. Spot on.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the description, I like that. One of the transitions I like here is that as you're building into the conversation, we have a lot of prose and we have a lot of body language, right? Because they're kind of negotiating what they're going to talk about. So it's a little bit slower. But then when we actually hit the segment and we get to the topic itself, it just moves. It's a really great technique. It keeps it really, the trade-off of the slower pace with the extra body language and dialogue tags and the thoughts, then to okay, now we're actually going to roll in the conversation and he's just answering. It's really great. Yeah. I do want you to slow down here because it is a little bit more fraught. He has a confession here. So it's when do you get them? Usually in the afternoon after recess. So you've been running around for a while. Yeah. Then I come in for math and it gets really bad. And you might, if you want to give him more language, you might want to tell a story there. Coming from math, I think it's really bad. Like yesterday, I couldn't even open my eyes. Do you get sick and have to go to the nurse? Sometimes, but usually Miss Bushnell won't let me go. One time I threw up on my desk and she let me out. She yelled at me a lot. And Mr. Hazley was angry too.
Okay, that's a mistake. It should be something like Mr. Johnson. So
yeah, I've just figured it was just a typo.
Yeah.
But so I want this, there's a confession moment here where he's actually telling on somebody. And so I would say sometimes Miss Bushnell won't let me go. One time I threw up so sometimes Miss Bushnell won't let me go. Right. And then I'd have him get nervous. Right. Haley got nervous that if Mr. Hazley told Miss Bushnell, he'd be in trouble. Except this one time she let me go because I threw up on my desk. And then
Okay.
she let me go out, right? Like, so use that, like, use this moment here to give that like backtrack of like, oh, I said something bad about this teacher that I'm a little bit afraid of, so I got to correct it. But in a very nice third grade way, I'm going to correct it and actually make it worse, right? She did let me go this one time because I threw up on my desk. It was gross. There was throw up everywhere, and she yelled a lot, and Mr. Johnson was mad too. But I got to go to the nurse, right? Like, so give me that last, like, I did get to go to the nurse thing in there just to like bring out that like fun kid
Okay.
stuff. Yeah. Like, who's Mr. Johnson, the janitor? Oh, he cleaned the desk. So now we're back into this is what I was talking about in the pacing. I like that, like, you slow down here to give me this story to get, and even if you build it out a little bit more emotionally, it's got that nice, and then you pick it back up here to that like fast, quick back and forth dialogue, which is really good.
Mhm.
Was that on purpose, or are you just flowing with it when you write it?
No, I was just flowing with it.
Yeah, it came out really nice. I find sometimes some of the best dialogue I write just is stuff that just flows out, and because you can visualize real conversation, it starts to like just play out that way. It's
Mhm.
nicely done. This was like, where in your head does it hurt? It just felt a little adult to me, like, huh, where in my head? But I don't know. It may have been better the way you wrote it. I wrote like, what do you mean? I actually think now that I look at it a second time, where in my head it's a better note. So ignore me.
Okay.
It's weird when you're playing with these kid voices, because you gotta, like, this is why I was saying at the beginning, like, I couldn't do a whole book in a kid voice, because it's one of those like, am I getting it right or am I not getting it right? Like, how does it feel? Yeah.
Well, and part of what I'm thinking about him here is that he actually is, smarter and a little bit more mature than your average 8-year-old. So if he's got a little bit more of the intelligence and vocabulary of a grade or two up, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the character that I want to portray.
Yeah, I wouldn't give him the vocabulary. I think the intelligence is there. Like, what it feels like to me you're building here is the kind of like the characters that come to mind are the kids in John Grisham's The Client.
Yeah.
They kind of come from a rough home life, and they're very streetwise.
Mm-hmm.
They're very smart. They kind of have an intuitive sense of like what to say and what not to say. When they say something, they know that they need to like back it down. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
it's going to get them hard to like actually give you a straight story if they feel threatened or in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But larger vocabularies tend, in my experience, I'm not a child psychologist. I have worked with children a lot, but in my experience, so kids who have big vocabularies talk to adults a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's not talking to an adult a lot, he's not going to have a bigger vocabulary. Does that make sense? Because that's where they learn, like, they pattern sentence structure and they pattern like complex thought when they're either around adults or around older kids. Like, my 6-year-old speaks like a teenager because he's got 3.5 teenagers in the house with him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that patterning of who they're around that improves their vocabulary. So I wouldn't give him big words, and I don't think you have. I think the words you've given him are great. Like, I wouldn't give him anything bigger. I think, like we're talking about, I would maybe back down the complexity of some of the thoughts and make him storytell instead. But again, some of this too, Aaron, is just technique and style of what you want to do with it. It's not. Yeah, I personally think the storytelling's fun, but that's, again, that's just my editors will tell you that they're constantly cutting characters talking about things that from my books that don't need to be there. Yeah. So this is another emotional shift here. Yeah, usually there. I feel it start there and then it covers my whole head pretty fast. That's a perfect like kid explanation of how things work. Like, yeah, kind of there, but then it's like all over, it's a really good explanation. I would probably add like slow it down a little bit here from that quick back and forth you've had, just to like note the emotional change in him as he's like thinking about pain that he has. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Not a lot, just a sentence or two of like, Hallie rubbed his head as he talked, right? Like, just give me a little body language to show that he's being more thoughtful. And I'd put it before the utterance or the verbalization. So if it's like, that side, Mr. Hazley said, quick smile coming across his face. Hallie rubbed his head as he talked. Yeah, usually there, right? Like, because it's that like putting the body language before the verbalization in our imagination slows that verbalization down just enough to make us feel like he's being more thoughtful.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, and in the chapter that I just gave you, that I edited, I actually flipped it the other way around. So in some ways it's stylistic, I guess.
Yeah, it is in some ways. I mean, all of this is stylistic in some ways, like there's no rules. It's just about like what sounds good to your ear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Headaches are no fun. So let's talk about other things now. Yeah. So this is another. So they talk about after a minute or so of writing notes, Mr. Hazley broke the silence. I do kind of want to know what Hallie's doing in this silence, because kids don't do well in silence. Like, so I'm interested to know so that I can understand Hallie as a kid. I'm interested to know what he's doing, right? Like, is he trying to read the notes Mr. Hazley is writing? Is he looking around the room? Is he like, playing with, does he grab something and play with it on the desk, right? Like all these different things kind of like tell us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But they tell us about Hallie and they give us more of a texture of like, okay, here's a kid in a room with an adult. Headaches are no fun. So let's talk about other things, some other things now. Okay. What do you want to talk about? I would add some nervousness here. And if you have Hallie like fidgeting with something, like if he takes something off the desk and starts playing with it, here's where he puts it back on the desk. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
to create some sense of motion. Okay, so here he caught himself fidgeting with his fingers and he gripped his pants to make himself stop. He hoped Mr. Hazley had noticed, because Miss Bushnell certainly would, and would scream at him for it. That's in that earlier scene, I assume.
It's a reference to how nasty she is, but she didn't. I don't remember. It's been a while since I read it. I mean, I can certainly put it in there. Or maybe it's or maybe it would be something that I mean, because we're only talking a couple thousand words, so the reader would have read it very recently. So, or maybe we could turn it into a quote, a statement.
Yeah, I don't know. If she's, I need to see her scream at him for something.
Okay.
Whether it's fidgeting or something else. This is a pretty big, like, there's a teacher that screams at him all the time, so that if he's afraid to even fidget, she's going to scream. We need to see her scream before we come in here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's certainly going to a scene where they butt heads, and yes.
Perfect. You have like Hallie looked, a point of light appeared above Mr. Hazley's hand. So Mr. Hazley starts doing this magic trick to test what Hallie's seeing. It's like Hallie looked, a point of light appeared above Mr. Hazley's hand. I would just get a stronger word than left. That's okay. Just because it's a pretty miraculous thing that's happening in front of him. So we want to see like what actually happens there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Are we ever going to get in your actual book this test explained?
No. Well, the no, but what he sees is going to appear.
Okay.
So it turns out that the test is prophetic, but nobody, including Halsey, understands that it's not supposed to be.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's such a descriptive. You do such a great job. Like when you got here, like he's like seeing a light, it's turning into different things, it's taking different forms, it's taking different colors. And then at one point he's like, hey, relax, don't worry about your hands, just focus on the light. What do you see now? At this point, I was super in. Like your descriptions here are great. It's a really strong piece. It's so strong that I was like, man, I hope this all comes back, because I want to know kind of what it means. So I love that you're foreshadowing to something. Yeah, I think it's good. This felt a little old, a big, thick book, really old, kind of a book that's like hundreds of years old. Maybe not. I don't know. Again, we're just playing with language. I'd actually
maybe we could drop the last, the kind of book that's hundreds of years old. He would know it's a big old book.
Yeah,
he could certainly say that.
Yeah, like it's a big thing. It was the hundreds of years old that caught me. I was like, that's a interestingly descriptive phrase. Yeah. This is good. The pages are trying to have little squiggles on them. I really like that. This was just extra. I didn't think you were adding anything. You have the pages. No, but I got a circular pattern to it. All swirly stuff like green water. Wait, it's opening. That's a great description. And then you had like, it's flipping pages. The pages have little squiggles on them. I just keep it kind of more direct. The pages are turning. They have little squiggles on them. Again, will a reader notice the difference between these two reads? It's incredibly unlikely. So it's just pushing words around the page. Yeah, this felt, again, this is another place where it felt a little
now that I read it again, it strikes me as a little old as well. Yeah,
it's zooming in on one of the letters on the ink. That's a very like complicated sentence where we've got this like post sentence clause. It's getting closer. One of the letters is getting bigger. Like, and then now everything else is gone. It's gray around the edges. Oh wait, now things are getting smaller again. But it's not the letters. It looks like fur. This is where you pull me back. It looks like fur. And he's like, fur? It's like, yeah, gray and black fur. It's getting smaller. Oh, it's a cat. It's a black and gray one with long hair. Right? Like, that's really great. I really liked all of that description. So here we get to the end of the test.
And just so you know, we're going to run into the Maine Coon with the orange eyes later in the book.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's great. And that's really the part that I want I want that to be foreshadowing. Here we come to the end of this segment where we're about to transition. Mr. Haley closed his outstretched hand and the ball of light disappeared. Fantastic, Haley. He said, you did great. You can give me a little bit, like I would go for another 2 sentences here about kind of how Hallie feels when it's over.
Okay.
What does he do? Hallie leaned back in his chair and sighed. Right? Like he didn't know if he passed or not, but he was just really glad the test was over. Does that make sense? Like just give me a couple more in that transition space so I can track it emotionally. This is so, a lot of times I criticize people for summaries. I'm like, take out your summaries. Let me see the scene. And then I read this one. I was like, this is an appropriate summary. So I just wanted to point it out because I'm always telling people they don't write appropriate summaries. And then there's an appropriate one. So it says, it doesn't mean anything, Hallie. People see different things. I saw a black tower, a deep hole, stairs leading nowhere. It just depends.
More foreshadowing, just so you know.
Oh, nice. Does Hazley come back in your novel?
Nope.
Okay. Stairs leading nowhere.
But the black tower and the deep hole and the stairs are a place, and we're going to go to the place.
Oh, very cool. Stairs leading nowhere. Like I said, it doesn't mean anything. For the rest of the morning, Mr. Hazley tested Hallie. They looked at flashcards and Hallie answered questions, did worksheets, and tried a breathing exercise that was supposed to help his headaches. That's an appropriate, I don't need to see them doing worksheets. Right? Like you've shown me the important part of the test.
Yeah.
At the foreshadowing, you gave me a complete emotional experience. I've seen Hallie like overcome this test. You've like taken me on this emotional journey. So summarizing like, hey, for the rest of the day, this is what we did. I think is really good. I would have Hazley, but the only thing is transitioning out of the summary. I just have Hazley ask the question before we get to Hallie's response. It's a little thing, but I think it'll be a little bit nicer transition from like it was supposed to help the headaches. It helps some, I guess. Haley said, I just, give me the question to lead into it a little bit more. It's not, again, I'm pushing words around the page because it's really well written. But yeah, this was all great. This is another place where you've left a kid in a room alone.
Okay, yeah.
So a kid in a room alone is not going to sit quietly, especially a third grader.
Yeah.
Like, we need to see what's happening. So, I understand I can't do any better, but I can go get it for us. I'll be back. Mr. Hazley reappeared in 10 minutes. Well, what did Hallie do for 10 minutes, right? Like, he's
Yeah.
doing something. So, I would just tell me give me like 3 or 4 sentences about that experience. Mr. Hazley leaves, and then what does Hallie do in that room for a couple minutes? I'd imagine he kind of sits in the chair with thinking Mr. Haley's going to come back at any point, and then something's going to catch his eye, and he's going to get up, he's going to play with it, then he's going to think he hears something, he's going to run back to the chair scared, and then he's going to look around, and then he's going to get back up and play with it a little bit more, and then he's going to hear the doorknob, and then he's going to run back to the chair, right? Like, so you're talking like 6 sentences. There's a little
Okay. Yeah.
I don't need a full chapter on like Haley alone in the room, but I just want a little something to give me to keep me in that kid world. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to talk about that's just a note. Yeah, this is just me pushing words around, but you have this really nice. He's talking about he had these grilled cheese sandwiches made for Hallie. I had them made fresh. That's something an adult can do sometimes if we ask nicely. I doubt they'd do it for a student though. Too much trouble. But today we made an exception. Well, that actually takes away the I had them made versus they're not going to make them for you. And he's like, but today they made them for you. So
Okay.
I just take that part out. But it's not again, I'm just pushing words around the page. It's not a big change. I loved this line. Wow, I didn't know they'd do anything except throw stuff in a microwave. And now you know better, which I guess makes it worse. I laughed out loud at that. That was really funny. Mostly because I have a bad habit of talking to children like they're adults for my own entertainment. So I really thought that was funny. Yeah, I did catch the worksheets here the second time I read it, so ignore that note. You have a note about did you enjoy the worksheets? And I was like, he didn't do any worksheets. And then I read it again. I was like, oh yeah, he did worksheets. So we get to the end of the test, and then we get into this conversation with his mother. Is this longer in the work itself? Like, did you cut this, or is this all there is for it?
Well, I cut after, but the conversation with his mother is very short because she's harassed and has all of the stress that she has, and she doesn't want to talk to the kid, and he knows that.
Yeah.
So it's like, go away, kid, you're bothering me,
Okay.
And after this, he actually formulates an 8-year-old half-baked plan to run away. So
nice.
This is something that he's used to. It's his normal, but it's still unpleasant.
Okay. I want a little bit more from his mom. It doesn't need to be a lot more. I just need you to give something more to her voice. So I'm looking for where it starts. How can I do magic? I forgot that there's a conversation with Mrs. Grayson in there, but there's nothing there that we haven't already talked about.
Yeah.
Okay. Does it come after the line? It does.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just going to highlight the words from mom real quick so we can look at her voice. So we've got Hallie get in here. What's this about the test? The school called me. They want you to go to a different school. Did they tell you why? They told me they want to send you to a magic school. Is that right? So at this point, she doesn't actually seem very mean, right? Like, I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4 utterances.
So I guess, I would need to work on his emotional response, because he would recognize her attitude.
Yeah. Well, and since we're not going to see her very much, she's a hazard character. We're not going to see her very much. We're just seeing her in these couple scenes. So I might just blow up her voice a little bit, like go full like Danny DeVito and Matilda, where it's just like being horrible, for the sake of showing that he's horrible. Like, yeah, Hallie, you know, you little good for nothing, blah, 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 blah. Get in here right now. Right? Like, just build
Okay.
it
Yeah.
out. Roused from his bedroom, Hallie shuffled into the living room. His mom had a snarl on her face and deep lines creasing her forehead, crow's feet around her eyes. Her short hair was swayed slightly. She looked up at him. I'm here, he said. What in the hell is this about? Some kind of test you took? Like, the school called me. I was at work and they called me. They can't call me at work. And they told me, you want to go to a different school? We can't afford a different school, right? Like, just start like building out that like scary voice for a kid who's like already feels more like mean and a little incredulous. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I just go bigger because we don't see her that much. So like, hit nuance is not your friend here, right? Like, because a reader's going to read it fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't be nuanced. Just pound us with it, right? Like, yeah, I guess, he mumbled. There is no way you pass. Like, I would actually do something like, there is no way you passed the test to get into a special school. Did you cheat? You cheated, didn't you? No. Did they tell you why they want you to special school? Is this a school for dum-dums? Right? Like, just like take it full out. And he'd be like, no. He's like, you think you're gonna get to go, don't you? You're not gonna get to go to that school. Right? Like, so just like build out the incriminating language from her to make it clear to us that, like, she's a monster. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's all I had.
Okay.
It was great. I thought it was really good.
Okay.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I mean, after this, he goes to school the next day and then tries to run away, but he doesn't think it through. And so the only thing he's left to do is walk home in the rain, which makes his mother angry because now he's wet and he's late. And,
nice.
We don't see that, but he thinks about what her reaction is going to be.
Yeah, that's
as
perfect.
as he walks toward his doom.
Yeah, so that's perfect. And if you can foreshadow somehow to like what's happening in the novel too at the end, that would be great. Just to connect this to the novel. I think that'd be really good. Yeah, we do need a scene where Mrs. Grayson, after this, but what I would say what probably triggers him running away is you need a scene where Mrs. Grayson pulls him back into the office and tells him she's very sorry, but he's not going to get to go to the school.
Yeah, that actually is a short scene in there.
Perfect.
Yeah. So it's like, she tells him he's not going to go. She's going to keep working on it. He never hears back. That's the last he hears from her. It's the typical adult stuff where they tell me they're going to do something and then they forget.
Yeah, we're going to keep talking about it. I'll try to talk to her some more. All those like assurances that are just not true.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, man, I think it's a great piece. Thanks for sharing it with me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to read it.
Yeah, of course. It was great. Yeah. Yeah, nice job. So I'll stop the recording when we talk a little bit more.
Okay.